Commander Soman Choi had been stationed at the Kepler defense platform for 12 years, and she had never seen anything that scared her until today. The massive structure was built into an asteroid and armed with the most powerful weapons the Ultron military could build. It was supposed to be able to stop any enemy fleet, but the things approaching through space made her weapons feel like toys. The enemy ships looked wrong. Somehow they were not really ships at all, but more like holes. In space itself, each vessel seemed to absorb light and energy from everything around it, making them appear as moving shadows against the stars. They came in perfect formation, hundreds of them arranged in geometric patterns that hurt to look at. Lieutenant Minhyuk Shin ran up to her command station, his face pale with terror. Commander, the outer defense grid is gone. All 15 stations just stopped responding. We did not even see them get destroyed. They just went dark. Soman checked her tactical display. The defense stations had been there moments ago, each one showing green status lights. Now the entire outer perimeter showed nothing but empty space, as if the stations had never existed at all. What about the patrol fleets? She asked, and Minhyuk swallowed hard. 23 ships were guarding the outer system. Commander, they launched a full attack on the lead enemy vessel. Plasma cannons, particle beams, kinetic bombardment, everything we had. The enemy ship absorbed every shot like it was drinking sunlight. Then our entire fleet just disappeared. The main screen showed footage from the battle. The Ultron ships had fired everything they had at a single enemy vessel. Their most powerful weapons struck the dark hull and simply vanished. The enemy ship grew slightly larger after absorbing the attack. Then space around the Ultron fleet began to twist and fold. The ship stretched like rubber before disappearing completely. Someone felt sick to her stomach. How many crew members were on those ships? 8,000 people. Commander, all gone in less than 30 seconds. The tactical officer called out from his station. Commander, incoming transmission from the enemy fleet. Put it on speakers. The voice that filled the command center was unlike anything Soman had ever heard. It sounded like the death of stars, like the universe itself was speaking. The words came in perfect Ultron language, but with an accent that suggested the speaker was very old and very tired. We are the devourers. We have consumed the civilizations of 1,000 galaxies. We have absorbed the knowledge and essence of countless species. Your technology is primitive. Your resistance is meaningless. You have 72 hours to prepare for consumption. The message repeated 3 times, then cut off, leaving the command center in terrible silence. Everyone stared at the main screen where hundreds of dark ships continued their steady approach toward the core worlds. Soman activated the emergency communications system. This is Commander Choi to all defense platforms and patrol fleets. The enemy has weapons we cannot understand. They absorb energy attacks and make our ships disappear. Do not engage in direct combat. Repeat, do not engage. But even as she gave the order, Soman knew it was hopeless. The outer colonies were already gone. 12 systems with billions of inhabitants had simply stopped communicating. The enemy was not conquering territory, they were erasing it completely. Captain Ken Nam commanded the heavy cruiser Defender at the edge of the Vega system. He had ignored the retreat orders and positioned his ship directly in the path of 3 enemy vessels. His crew of 400 had volunteered to buy time for the civilian evacuation ships. The enemy ships approached slowly, as if they had all the time in the universe. Captain Nam ordered his weapons officer to fire everything they had. Missile tubes launched. Their entire payload. Energy cannons fired at maximum power. The ship's main gun, a massive particle beam weapon designed to crack planets, discharged directly at the lead enemy vessel. The weapon struck the dark hull and disappeared without causing any visible damage. The enemy ship did not even slow down. Instead, it seemed to grow slightly larger, as if it had been fed by the attack. Then space around the Defender began to change. Reality twisted and bent in ways that should not be possible. The ship's hull started to stretch and distort. Crew members screamed as they felt themselves being pulled apart at the molecular level. Captain Nam's last transmission was heard across the entire fleet. We cannot fight them. Run as far as you can. The Defender vanished, leaving no debris, no energy signature, no trace that it had ever existed. The 3 enemy ships continued toward Vega Prime, where 20 million people waited in terror. News of the defeats spread faster than the enemy fleet itself. Panic gripped the core worlds as civilians tried to flee to the Outer Rim only to discover that the Outer Rim no longer existed. Some civilizations attempted to surrender hoping that submission might save them, but the Devourers ignored all communication attempts. The Vexi Hive Queen gathered her entire military force at the Centauri Nexus. 2 million warriors and ships designed for swarm tactics surrounded a single enemy vessel. The Queen ordered a coordinated attack from all directions, thinking that surely the enemy could not absorb attacks from every angle simultaneously. The Vexi fleet opened fire with weapons that could shatter moons. The energy barrage would have destroyed any normal target, but the lone enemy ship absorbed every shot from every direction. The dark hull pulsed and grew larger. With each impact, then something impossible happened. The enemy ship began to duplicate itself. One vessel became 2, then 4, then 8. Each copy was identical to the original, and each one began moving toward a different section of the Vexi fleet within minutes. 2 million Vexi warriors simply ceased to exist. Their ships were stretched and folded through dimensions that should not exist until they disappeared completely. The Hive Queen's final message was a single click that translated to total despair. The Lumin Collective tried a different approach. Being energy beings themselves, they attempted to communicate with the Devourers on a quantum level. They offered to share their knowledge, their culture, their very essence in exchange for mercy. The enemy response was swift and brutal. The Devourers reached into the energy dimension where the Lumins existed and began to drain them directly. Beings that had lived for millions of years as pure energy were consumed in seconds. Their ancient wisdom and cosmic knowledge became part of something dark and hungry. As system after system fell silent, the surviving civilizations faced a terrible truth. Nothing in their arsenal could even slow down the enemy. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy was useless against creatures that could consume energy itself. The Galactic Council met in emergency session, but there was nothing left to discuss. The most powerful military forces in known space had been eliminated without inflicting a single casualty on the enemy. The core worlds had perhaps days before the Devourers reached them. It was Counselor Hyunwoo Lee who finally spoke the words. Everyone was thinking, we have one option left. We must contact the humans and pray that 5,000 years of preparation has given them weapons. We cannot imagine. The message was sent toward the Sol system, a desperate plea for help from a species that had been ignored and forgotten. But as the communication traveled through space, everyone wondered. The same thing, would humanity even answer? And if they did, would they care enough to help a galaxy that had written them off as extinct? Deep in space near Earth's moon, something changed. The massive human fleet that had waited in silence for 5 millennia began to stir. Power systems that had been dormant activated. Navigation computers came online. Weapon systems that had been theoretical became reality. After 5,000 years of silence, humanity was finally ready to speak again. Admiral Tae-yun Song stood in the command center of the flagship Righteous Dawn, watching the tactical displays show the complete destruction of galactic civilization. He had been expecting this day for his entire life. Every human born in the last 5,000 years had been preparing for exactly this moment. The command center was built deep inside Earth's moon, surrounded by armor that could withstand the explosion of stars. The walls were covered with screens showing every system in the galaxy. Most of them were now dark, consumed by the entities calling themselves Devourers. But Admiral Song was not surprised by this development. He was a tall man with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much warfare. His family had been military for over 3,000 years, each generation adding to humanity's vast store of combat knowledge. His great-grandfather had designed the reality bombs. His grandmother had perfected the gravity hammers. His father had developed the quantum disruptors that could tear apart matter at the subatomic level. Now, it was his turn to use everything humanity had learned about warfare. Captain Yoonji Nam entered the command center carrying the communication device that had been silent for 5 millennia. The message from the Galactic Council was desperate and terrified. Admiral, the galaxy is requesting our assistance against the entities they call Devourers. Admiral Song smiled grimly. He had read every report about the Devourer attacks, their tactics, their weapons, their apparent ability to consume energy itself. Nothing about their methods surprised him, because humanity had encountered similar entities before. 5,000 years ago, Earth had been visited by scouts from something calling itself The hunger they had tested human defenses found them lacking and promised to return with a full invasion force. Humanity had exactly 1,000 years to prepare before the main fleet arrived. When the hunger returned, they found Earth defended by weapons that should not exist, reality bombs that could erase sections of space-time, gravity hammers that created temporary black holes, quantum disruptors that unmade anything they touched. The entire hunger fleet was destroyed in a battle that lasted 17 minutes, but the victory came with a terrible realization: the hunger was not unique. There were other entities in the dark spaces between galaxies, things that consumed entire civilizations for sustenance. Humanity had won one battle, but the war was just beginning, so they made a decision that shocked even themselves. They would withdraw from galactic civilization completely. They would build a fleet in secret and wait for the real enemy to arrive. When that day came, they would be ready to protect everyone, whether those civilizations wanted their protection or not. Admiral Song opened the communication channel that had been closed for 50 centuries. "This is Admiral Song of the Human Defense Fleet. We received your message. We are coming throughout the Sol system." 50,000 warships began to move. Each vessel was a masterpiece of human engineering, built with technology that other civilizations could not imagine. The hulls were made from compressed neutron matter that could withstand direct hits from supernovas. The reactors used controlled singularities that produced more energy than most stars. Captain Ujinam commanded the heavy cruiser Righteous Fury as it moved out from Earth orbit. Her ship was 3 kilometers long and armed with weapons that had been tested in pocket dimensions to avoid damaging local space. The main gun could fire miniature black holes at 90% of light speed. Her crew had trained for this mission their entire lives. Lieutenant Jinwoo Park, the navigation officer, could plot hyperspace jumps that would arrive at the exact nanosecond required. Commander Hajin Lee, the weapons specialist, knew every system on the ship well enough to repair them while under fire. Dr. Yuna Choi, the chief scientist, had helped design half the weapons they carried. As the human fleet entered hyperspace, Captain Nam felt the familiar sensation of reality bending around them. Human hyperspace technology was different from what other civilizations used. Instead of jumping between dimensions, they folded space itself, creating tunnels through the fabric of the universe. The journey that should have taken weeks took only hours. When they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the galaxy, they found exactly what Admiral Song had predicted. The Devourers were not just consuming planets, they were consuming the fundamental forces that held reality together. The enemy ships were worse than the report suggested. Each one was a tear in space itself, a wound in the universe that grew larger with every system it consumed. They moved with purpose toward the galactic core, where the remaining civilizations huddled in terror. Admiral Song opened communications to his entire fleet. "This is what we trained for. This is why we stayed hidden while civilizations rose and fell around us. The enemy believes they have already won. They think there is nothing left that can threaten them. They are about to learn how wrong they are." He activated the fleet-wide tactical display. Every human ship appeared as a point of light arranged in formations that had been practiced for millennia. Battle groups spread out across light years of space, each one designed for a specific type of engagement. The plan was simple in concept, but terrifyingly complex in execution. They would engage the Devourers at multiple points, simultaneously using weapons and tactics that no energy-consuming entity had ever encountered. The key was to attack faster than the enemy could adapt. Captain Don Ho Kim piloted the stealth destroyer Silent Death toward the nearest Devourer formation. His ship was invisible to most sensors and armed with reality bombs that could erase targets from existence. The plan was to get close enough to plant the bombs inside the enemy vessels before they could react. As he approached the first Devourer ship, Captain Kim felt the familiar calm that came before combat. His ship's hull began to heat up from the dark energy radiating from the enemy vessel, but his shields held. The reality bombs were armed and ready. He spoke into his communication device. "This is Silent Death, beginning attack run. If this works, we are about to show these things what happens when they threaten our galaxy." Throughout human space, similar conversations were taking place. 50,000 ships with 50,000 crews, all preparing to engage an enemy that had consumed 1,000 galaxies. Each human knew that they might not survive the battle, but they also knew that failure was not an option. The galaxy had forgotten about humanity. But humanity had never forgotten about the galaxy. They had spent 5,000 years becoming the perfect weapon, and now it was time to remind the universe why humans were the most dangerous species ever evolved. Admiral Song watched as his ships moved into position. The first phase of the attack would begin in 30 seconds. After 50 centuries of preparation, humanity was finally going to war, and this time they were fighting for everything. The emergency meeting hall on Nexus Prime had never seen anything like this. Every representative from every major civilization in the galaxy was present, and they were all talking at once. The air was thick with tension and fear as Captain Jiho Kim stood at the center podium trying to explain what his patrol ship had discovered. Council leader Minji Park raised her hand for silence. She was an elderly Alteran diplomat who had served on the council for over 200 years. Her blue skin was wrinkled with age, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. She had seen many crises, but nothing like this. Captain Kim, please repeat your report for the record, she said in a calm voice that did not match the chaos around them. Jeho activated the holographic display showing the massive fleet they had discovered around the Red Planet. 50,000 warships, each one larger than our biggest vessels, all showing active power systems and advanced weapons, all carrying the same symbol, a blue planet with a single moon. The Vexi representative clicked his mandibles nervously. The insect-like creature had 6 arms and compound eyes that reflected the light from the holographic display. Are you certain these ships belong to the extinct human species? Jeho nodded. The old archives confirm it. The symbol matches exactly. And the voice that warned us spoke perfect Alteran. They have been watching us, learning our languages, probably for thousands of years. A collective shiver ran through the assembly. The idea that an unknown civilization had been observing them without their knowledge was deeply disturbing. But it was about to get much worse. Counselor Hyunwoo Lee stood up slowly. He was one of the few beings in the chamber who was old enough to remember when humans were still active in galactic affairs. His species lived for over 1,000 years, and he had been young when the last human diplomatic mission visited the council chambers. I met them once, he said quietly. The entire hall fell silent to listen to his words. I was barely an adult when a human delegation came to negotiate mining rights in the Outer Rim. This was about 800 years ago, long after most people thought they were extinct. What were they like? Asked the Lumin representative. Its energy form pulsed with curiosity. Hyunwoo Lee closed his eyes as if remembering something unpleasant. They looked at you like they were studying you, like they were figuring out exactly how to kill you. Even during peaceful conversation, their leader was a woman named Commander Sarah Chun. She smiled and spoke politely, but her eyes never stopped moving, never stopped calculating. He paused and looked around the chamber. I have met warriors from every species in this galaxy. I have seen the fiercest Alteran generals and the most ruthless Vexi Hive commanders, but I have never seen anything like human eyes. They looked at warfare like it was both art and science. The Vexi representative shifted uncomfortably. What happened to that delegation? They completed their negotiations, bought mining rights to several asteroid belts, and then disappeared completely. We assumed they had returned to their home system, but now I think they were probably establishing secret bases. We thought we were dealing with a small group of survivors, but I think we were dealing with scouts. Minji Park called up the historical archives on the main display. The records show that humans once controlled most of their solar system. They had colonies on multiple planets and asteroid mining operations throughout the region. Then approximately 5,000 years ago, all communication stopped. The Lumin representative pulsed brighter. Why would a civilization go silent for so long? A new voice spoke from the back of the chamber. It was Dr. Suman Choi, the galaxy's leading expert on extinct civilizations. She was a small woman with gray hair, but her reputation was enormous. Maybe they were not going silent. Maybe they were going into hiding. The chamber erupted in nervous chatter. Dr. Choi continued speaking over the noise. According to the old records, humans had a concept called total war. They believed that if you were going to fight, you should use every resource, every weapon, every advantage available. No other species has ever approached warfare with that level of complete commitment. She activated her own display showing ancient human military history. Look at their records. They turned their entire civilization into a war machine during conflicts. They converted factories into weapon production facilities. They trained their entire population for combat. They turned civilian spacecraft into warships. The implications hung heavy in the air. If humans had been preparing for war for 5,000 years, what kind of military force would they have built but preparing for war against what? Asked the Vexi representative. Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. Emergency lights flashed red and the main display switched to incoming communication channels. A panicked voice crackled through the speakers. "This is Commander Taeyun Park of the Outer Rim Defense Force. We are under attack by unknown vessels. Request immediate assistance. Repeat, we are under attack." The display showed grainy images of massive dark ships that seemed to absorb light itself. They moved through space like living shadows, consuming everything in their path. The human fleet Discovery was suddenly the least of their worries. The attacking ships were unlike anything anyone had ever seen. They did not fire traditional weapons. Instead, they seemed to drain energy directly from their targets. Entire defense stations simply went dark and stopped responding. Small patrol ships disappeared completely as if they had never existed. As the council watched in horror, the Outer Rim colonies went silent one by one. Each system sent a brief distress call before communications cut off completely. The attack was swift, methodical, and absolutely devastating. The unknown enemy broadcast a single message across all frequencies. Their voice sounded like stars dying, like the universe itself was speaking. "We are the Devourers. We have consumed 1,000 galaxies. Your resistance is meaningless. You have 72 hours to prepare for consumption." The message repeated endlessly as the assembly sat in stunned silence. They were facing an enemy that claimed to have destroyed entire galaxies, and their most powerful defense fleets were being eliminated without even slowing the attackers down. Minji Park stood up slowly, her face pale with fear. "We need to evacuate the core worlds immediately. All available ships should begin emergency protocols." But Counselor Hyunwoo Lee was staring at the tactical display with a strange expression on his face. "Wait," he said quietly, "there might be another option." The entire chamber turned to look at him. He pointed at the display showing the human fleet still waiting silently in the Sol system. "If these Devourers are as powerful as they claim, then conventional weapons will not stop them." "But humans do not use conventional weapons. They use whatever works." "Are you suggesting we ask for help from a species we have ignored for 5,000 years? Asked Minji Park. Hyunwoo Lee nodded slowly. "If we are facing extinction, then yes. That is exactly what I am suggesting. Humans spent 5 millennia preparing for something, and I think this might be it." The debate that followed was intense. Some council members argued that humanity might side with the Devourers. Others worried that asking for help would make them look weak. But as more colonies fell silent and the enemy fleet moved steadily toward the core worlds, the choice became clear. They would send a message to the Sol system and hope that after 5,000 years of silence, humanity would remember what it meant to be part of the galactic community, and they would pray that human military technology was as advanced as their fears suggested, because if it was not, then everything they had ever known was about to be consumed by the darkness between stars. Captain Jiho Kim was bored out of his mind. He had been flying patrol missions in the dead zones of space for 3 months now, and nothing exciting ever happened. The Alteron Deep Space Patrol was supposed to be an elite unit, but all they did was map old debris fields and check for space pirates who never showed up. His ship, the Star Runner, was small but fast with enough firepower to handle most threats. The crew consisted of only 5 people, including himself. There was Minji, the navigation officer, who always complained about the boring routes; Sung-hoon, the weapons specialist, who spent most of his time playing holographic games; Yuna, the engineer, who talked to the ship computers more than actual people; and Duyun, the communications officer, who listened to old music from dead civilizations. Today, they were checking the outer edges of what used to be called the Sol system. Nobody had been here in thousands of years. The old record said there used to be a species called humans who lived on the 3rd planet, but they had gone silent so long ago that most people forgot they ever existed. The Galactic Council had marked this entire region as empty space. Jiho was reading reports on his datapad when Minji suddenly sat up. Straight at her station, her blue skin turned even paler than usual, which meant she was either scared or excited. "Captain, there are massive energy signatures coming from the 4th planet in this system. she said, her voice shaking slightly. Jiho put down his data pad and looked at the main screen. The fourth planet was small and red with two tiny moons. Nothing should be there according to all their maps. What kind of energy signatures? He asked. Minji's fingers danced across her control panel, pulling up readings that made no sense. The signatures are huge, Captain, bigger than anything I have ever seen before, and they are not natural. These are artificial structure. Essingon looked up from his game console. Did someone say artificial structures? Maybe we finally found something interesting. Yuna rolled her eyes. You always get excited about the wrong things. Remember last time when you thought we found an ancient weapon and it turned out to be a broken communications relay, but this was different. Even Jiho could see that the energy readings were unlike anything in their databases. The signatures were organized in perfect geometric patterns around the planet, like someone had built a massive grid in space set. Course for the fourth planet. He ordered Minji, I want to see what we are dealing with. As the Star Runner moved closer, the crew became more and more amazed. The energy signatures were not just big, they were enormous. Each one was larger than an Alteron city ship, and there were thousands of them arranged in perfect formations around the planet. When they got close enough to use visual scanners, everyone on the bridge went completely silent. What they saw was impossible. According to every database in the galaxy, this system was empty, but floating in space around the red planet were the largest artificial structures any of them had ever seen. The structures were clearly ships, but they were like no ships anyone had ever built. Each one was at least 10 kilometers long. With smooth, dark hulls that seemed to absorb light, they were arranged in perfect military formations with larger command ships in the center and smaller escort vessels arranged around them in defensive patterns. Captain Yuna whispered, these ships are old, really old, but they are not dead. All of them are showing active power systems and life. Super Jiho felt a chill run down his spine. How many ships are there? Minji checked her scanners twice before answering. Over 50,000 confirmed. Contacts, Captain, and there might be more hidden behind the planet. 50,000 warships, sitting silent in space for who knows how long. Each ship was large enough to carry thousands of crew members and equipped with weapon systems that their scanners could barely identify. The implications were terrifying. Zhongan was no longer playing games. He was staring at his weapons display with a confused expression. Captain, these ships have firepower ratings that are off the charts. Each one of these vessels could probably destroy our entire fleet. Who built them? Doyun asked the question they were all thinking. Jiho pulled up the old archives, searching for any information about this system. The records were thousands of years old, but they told an interesting story. The third planet had once been home to a species called humans who had built primitive spacecraft and explored their local system. Then about 5,000 years ago, all communication from this region had stopped. The Galactic Council had sent investigation teams, but they found nothing. No ships, no signals, no signs of life. The assumption was that the humans had either destroyed themselves in war or died out from disease or environmental collapse. No one had bothered to check again, but now they were looking at the largest fleet anyone had ever assembled, and it was sitting right where the humans used to live. Captain, should we try to make contact? Doyun asked before Jiho could answer. Yuna pointed at her engineering display. Captain, the ships are powering. Upon the main screen they watched as thousands of dark vessels suddenly came to life. Running lights activated along their hulls. Weapon systems emerged from hidden compartments. Shield generators began to glow with barely contained energy. The entire fleet was waking up then. Every communication system on the Star Runner activated at once. A voice spoke in perfect Alteron language, calm and polite, but with an undertone that made everyone on the bridge nervous. You are not authorized to be in this system. Please leave immediately or face the consequences. Jiho tried to respond, but the voice continued. You have 10 minutes to clear the perimeter. If you attempt to approach any of our vessels or launch any scanning probes, you will be considered hostile. This is your only warning. The communication ended, leaving the bridge in complete silence. Everyone stared at the main screen where 50,000 warships waited patiently for their response. Captain, Minji said quietly, I think we should leave. Joe nodded. Set course for the nearest hyperspace jump point, maximum speed. As the Star Runner fled the system, Jiho watched the massive fleet through the rear cameras. The ships made no move to follow them, but he could feel thousands of sensors tracking their every movement. Until they jumped to hyperspace, he had the uncomfortable feeling that they were being watched by something very old and very dangerous. When they finally reached safe space, Jiho sat back in his command chair and tried to process what they had discovered. Humanity was not extinct. They had been building ships for 5,000 years in complete secrecy, and now they had a fleet that could probably conquer the entire galaxy. If they wanted to, the question was, why had they stayed hidden for so long, and what would it take to make them come out of hiding? Jiho had a feeling that the galaxy was about to find out, and he was not sure anyone was ready for the answer. The silence that followed the destruction of the last Devourer ship was different from any quiet the galaxy had ever known. It was not the silence of death or emptiness, but the silence of awe mixed with terror and a healthy respect for what they had just witnessed. Admiral Taeyeon Song stood in the command center of his flagship, looking at the tactical display that showed scattered debris where moments before an enemy fleet had threatened all existence. His own fleet was reduced to less than 20,000 ships, but every remaining vessel was a testament to human determination and ingenuity. Council leader Minji Park received the first communication from the human fleet while she huddled in the emergency bunker beneath Nexus Prime. Her hands shook as she accepted the transmission, expecting either demands for tribute or perhaps a declaration of human conquest of galactic space. Instead, Admiral Song's voice was calm and matter-of-fact. The threat has been eliminated. We are returning to Earth. Do not follow us. Do not attempt to contact us unless the galaxy faces extinction again. We will be watching. We will be ready. The communication ended, leaving Minji Park staring at a blank screen. She had expected many things from humanity after their display of overwhelming military power, but she had not expected them to simply leave. Captain Jiho Kim, whose patrol ship had first discovered the human fleet, watched from a safe distance as the survivors began their journey home. The human vessels moved in perfect formation. Despite the damage many had sustained, their discipline was absolute, even in victory. As the human fleet passed his position, one ship broke formation and approached. Captain Kim recognized it as the same vessel that had warned him away from Earth months earlier. Communication came through on all frequencies. Captain Kim, this is Captain Yoonji Nam. You were the first to find us, and you chose to leave when warned. We remember this. When you return to your people, tell them that humanity holds no grudge against those who forgot us. We understand why the galaxy wanted to believe we were gone. The ship rejoined the formation and continued toward the Sol system, leaving Captain Kim with a message. He would spend the rest of his life trying to fully understand. News of the battle spread throughout the surviving worlds faster than light itself. The story grew with each telling, becoming legend even before the facts were fully known. Children who had never heard of humans suddenly learned songs about the species that appeared when hope was lost. Our Suman Troy, the expert on extinct civilizations, found herself overwhelmed with requests for information about human history and culture. But the more she researched, the more she realized how little anyone actually knew about them. The humans had been careful to remain mysterious even when they were active in galactic affairs. On the Vexi homeworld, the surviving hive queens gathered to discuss what they had learned. The insect creatures communicated through pheromone signals that translated roughly to deep respect mixed with terror. They had witnessed an entire species that treated warfare as both science and art form. The queen of the third hive clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. They sacrifice individual ships to position single shots. They destroy their own vessels to deny the enemy advantages. They fight like each battle is the end of everything, because for them it always is. The Lumin Collective had been nearly extinct after the Devourer attack, but the few survivors pulsed with new understanding. They had always thought of themselves as the most advanced species in the galaxy, beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form, but they had watched humans manipulate reality itself as if it were just another tool. Years passed and the galaxy began to rebuild, but everything had changed. The human intervention had saved everyone, but it had also shattered many comfortable assumptions about the nature of power and civilization. Captain Hyunwoo Park, son of the council member who had met humans centuries before, joined the new Galactic Survey service dedicated to mapping and understanding the changed galaxy. He made it his mission to study every system the humans had passed through on their return journey. What he found amazed him. The human fleet had stopped at dozens of worlds along their route, not to conquer or demand tribute, but to repair. Damage caused by the Devourer attacks, broken space stations had been restored, damaged ships had been fixed. Entire ecosystems disrupted by dark energy had been carefully healed. The humans had saved the galaxy, then spent months quietly cleaning up the mess before disappearing back to their home system. Lieutenant Sora Kim, a young Ultron officer serving on the Outer Rim Patrol, discovered something that would become legendary throughout known space. While investigating debris from the final battle, she found a single human fighter craft drifting powerless in space. Inside was a message recorded by the pilot before his final attack. "My name is Lieutenant Min Jae-yoon of the Human Defense Fleet. If anyone finds this, please know that we did not fight for glory or conquest. We fought because someone had to. Someone always has to stand between the darkness and the light. Today that someone was us. Tomorrow it might be you. Be ready." The message became required reading at every military academy in the galaxy, not because it was tactically useful, but because it explained something fundamental about the human approach to warfare. They did not fight to win, they fought to protect. Decades turned to centuries, and the Sol system returned to its silent vigil. The massive fleet that had saved the galaxy went dark again, their ships powered down to minimal systems. Human communications fell silent, just as they had 5,000 years before, but now the galaxy knew the truth. Humanity was not extinct, they were not weak, they were watching and waiting for the next threat that would require their intervention. They had become the galaxy's hidden guardians, whether the galaxy wanted guardians or not. Council leader Minji Park, now ancient even by Ultron standards, often stood on the observation deck of Nexus Prime looking toward the distant Sol system. She had been there during humanity's return, and she understood something that many others missed: the humans had not saved the galaxy out of kindness or obligation. They had saved it because that was what humans did. When faced with extinction, they became more dangerous than the thing trying to extinct them. When faced with impossible odds, they found ways to make the impossible irrelevant. On quiet nights, when the station was nearly empty, she would sometimes wonder what other threats might be lurking in the dark spaces between galaxies. What other ancient hungers might be stirring in response to the defeat of the Devourers. But then she would remember the calm certainty in Admiral Song's voice when he promised that humanity would be watching and waiting. The thought brought her comfort, even as it reminded her that the galaxy's safety depended on a species that most people still preferred to think was extinct. In the deep void between galaxies, ancient things that had slept for millions of years began to stir. They had felt the death of the Devourers across impossible distances, and they were curious about what could have destroyed such powerful entities. They began to move slowly, but inevitably, toward the galaxy that had produced such dangerous protectors. But in the Sol system, 50,000 ships waited patiently in the darkness around Earth's moon. Their crews trained, their weapons were maintained, their resolve remained absolute. After 5,000 years of preparation, they had proven themselves in battle. Now they would wait another 5,000 years if necessary, because someone had to stand between the darkness and the light, and that someone would always be human. The battle began in the Kepler system, where the last major galactic fleet was trapped between three massive Devourer formations. The surviving ships were badly damaged and running out of power. Their commanders had accepted that this would be their final stand. Then space itself seemed to tear open as 50,000 human warships dropped out of hyperspace directly between the fleeing civilians and the advancing enemy. The human fleet appeared in perfect battle formation, as if they had been planning this exact moment for centuries. Captain Do-Yun Park commanded the gravity hammer ship Stellar Forge, positioned at the center of the human battle line. His vessel was designed for one purpose: to create controlled gravitational distortions that could crush enemy formations. His crew had drilled this scenario 10,000 times. Fire gravity hammer, he ordered calmly. The weapon discharged, creating a localized gravitational field in the center of the nearest Devourer formation. Space began to bend and twist as artificial gravity pulled the enemy ships toward a single point. 3 Devourer vessels that had consumed entire fleets found themselves being torn apart by forces they could not absorb. The enemy ships tried to drain the gravitational energy, but gravity was not energy, it was the curvature of space itself. The devourers that had seemed invincible suddenly found themselves trapped in an inescapable well of twisted reality. For the first time since the invasion began, enemy vessels or actually destroyed. The three devourer ships collapsed into the artificial singularity, leaving nothing behind but empty space and scattered dark matter. The response from the main enemy fleet was immediate and brutal. Dark energy beams that had annihilated countless civilizations lanced out toward the human ships. But Admiral Song had expected this. The human vessels did not try to block or avoid the attacks. Instead, they absorbed them. Captain Yunji Nam watched as her ship's energy levels increased dramatically as enemy fire struck their shields. The righteous Fury had been designed with adaptive armor that converted incoming energy into power for their own weapons. Every shot the devourers fired made human guns more dangerous. Return fire, she ordered with grim satisfaction. The ship's main cannon discharged a miniature black hole at near light speed. The projectile struck a devourer vessel and began consuming it from the inside out. The enemy ship tried to absorb the black hole, but found itself being devoured instead. Within seconds, another devourer was gone across the battlefield. Human tactics confused and terrified the enemy. The devourers had consumed 1,000 galaxies using the same methods: absorb energy attacks and drain the life force from organic beings. But humans fought differently. Lieutenant Yuna Kim led a squadron of fighter craft directly into the heart of the devourer swarm. Her ship was tiny compared to the massive enemy vessels, but it moved with liquid grace through the battlefield. Human pilots could survive acceleration forces that would kill any other species, and their ships could change direction in ways that defied physics. She activated her reality bomb, small devices that could erase local space-time and create temporary holes in the universe. Her target was a massive devourer command ship that was coordinating the enemy fleet, diving into the shadow cast by the enemy vessel. She armed her weapons and spoke into the communication system. This is Ghost Leader, beginning bombing runtime to show these things what happens when they mess with our galaxy. Reality bombs detonated inside the devourer ship, creating cascading failures in the creature's ability to maintain its existence. The command vessel began to collapse as sections of its hull were simply erased from reality, but the battle was far from over. The devourers adapted quickly to human tactics, splitting their formations and attacking from multiple directions. Simultaneously, they had learned that human weapons were dangerous, but they still outnumbered the human fleet by almost 10 to 1. Captain Jinsu Lee commanded the heavy battleship Iron Will when it was surrounded by 12 enemy vessels. His ship was powerful, but not powerful enough to fight so many devourers at once. His crew prepared for a final desperate battle. Then Admiral Song's voice came over the communication system. Iron Will, this is Admiral Song. Execute Protocol 7 immediately. Captain Lee smiled grimly. Protocol 7 was something they had hoped never to use. It involved sacrificing his entire ship to create a chain reaction that would destroy everything within a light year radius, including his own crew. He activated the ship's self-destruct sequence, but this was not an ordinary explosion. The Iron Will's reactor was designed to create a controlled supernova that would burn hot enough to consume dark matter itself. For my crew, for my species, for the galaxy, he said as he pressed the final button. The Iron Will exploded with the force of a dying star. The blast wave expanded at light speed, consuming everything in its path. The 12 devourer ships that had surrounded Captain Lee simply ceased to exist, vaporized by temperatures that could melt quarks throughout the battlefield. Similar sacrifices were being made. Human commanders threw their ships into suicidal attacks that eliminated dozens of enemy vessels at a time. Fighter pilots rammed their craft into devourer hulls, detonating weapons that unmade reality itself. The devourers began to show something they had never experienced before: fear. These humans fought with desperate fury that bordered on insanity. They would destroy their own ships to position a single shot. They treated their own lives as ammunition to be expended for maximum effect. Captain Minjae Yoon piloted his ship directly into the maw of a massive devourer vessel. His hull began to dissolve as the enemy tried to consume his ship. But he had expected this. His vessel was filled with quantum disruptors set to activate when his life signs stopped. As the devourer absorbed his ship, it also absorbed the quantum disruptors. The weapons activated inside the creature's core and began tearing apart the fundamental particles that held it together. The enemy vessel screamed across dimensions as it was unmade at the subatomic level. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships used tactics that no sane military would ever attempt. They created black holes inside their own formations to deny the enemy space to maneuver. They detonated reality. Bombs in chains that erased entire sections of the battlefield. They fired weapons that required the complete destruction of their own ships to function, but slowly, inevitably, the human fleet began to win, not through superior numbers or better technology, but through sheer determination and absolute refusal to accept defeat. Every human ship that was destroyed took multiple enemy vessels with it. Every pilot who died made sure their sacrifice eliminated as many devourers as possible. When the last enemy ship finally collapsed into quantum foam, the surviving human vessels hung motionless in space. Many were heavily damaged. Most had lost significant crew members, but they had done something that no other civilization had managed. They had completely annihilated an enemy that claimed to have consumed 1,000 galaxies. Admiral Song surveyed the aftermath of the battle. His fleet was reduced to less than 20,000 ships, but the devourer threat was ended. The galaxy was safe, and humanity had proven once again why they were the most dangerous species in the universe.